everybody. I'm Jason. You met me before. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about game programming, which is something that I do like all the time. Yeah, I just noticed that look like there are a few game enthusiasts in here. The head crab guy up the back, and what are you guys playing on DS?
Mario Party.
Mario Party, cool. Yeah, so I'll try to get through my slides quickly so that there could be some Q&A. But yeah, I'll just skip up to where I was.
Yeah!
Yeah, so games are written in programming languages. I'm going to start really simple. There's a bunch of different languages that are used, but the most common is C++, which is what I work in all the time. And pretty much all games, from Gears of War to Pokemon to Mario Party, are all have one thing in common, which is a game loop, which is basically as fast as it can, the code for the game will run a loop that will update and then render, which render is another word for like a display. So when it updates, it moves everything into the correct positions. The game logic is processed and all of that kind of stuff. And in the render is where the renderer takes everything at its current position and renders that to the frame buffer, which then is rendered to the screen. So yeah, so on the left, I've got here in the update, for instance, in AFL Wii, we would do things like we would calculate the input, we would get the input from the Wii remotes, we'd move, and then we'd move the footballers based on that input. So if the player is pressing left on the controller, then we get the footballer to run left, and we'd also move the ball based on the physics, so its current velocity. And so the important thing to know about the game loop is that it's running just all the time. And a good way to think about it is thinking about like watching a cartoon go really slowly. So each frame of a cartoon has just like a little bit of movement, and then when you speed that up, that becomes movement. But when you're programming games, you're kind of thinking in those little time slices that happen 60 times a second. Yeah, whatever the next one. Yeah, so this is a little bit. Oh, sorry. It's a little bit pseudocode-ish, but this is what a game loop looks like. This is like C++, basically. Well, kind of C, but anyway. So run is called from like Windows or whatever when your application starts, and then you call a load function, which inside the load function you'd load up all of the graphics, all of the 3D models. And what have you. And then this while loop is what I was talking about with the 60 frames a second. It'll run the things inside these braces as fast as it can. So basically 60 times a second for a 60 FPS game, or if it's 20 FPS, then it'll be 20 times a second. And it'll just constantly be calling update, render, update, render. Yeah. Now, there's one other concept here, which is the delta time. When you're going from one frame of the game to the next frame, and say you've got a guy doing a running animation, you need to figure out how far his arm needs to move in this frame. So what you do is you figure out the amount of time that has been taken from the last frame to the current frame, which in a 60 FPS game, that's going to be 0.016667 seconds, or 16 milliseconds, and then you use that number to go, all right, well, now he should be 16 milliseconds more through the current animation. So, and then as it goes through this loop over and over again, it'll play the next little bit, then the next little bit, and then the next little bit, and then you've got a run animation that's being played. Yeah, and then the final little bit is the unload at the end, which to clean up your RAM so that you don't, like after you run a few programs, your computer doesn't die. Yeah, so I'll step into each of these sections a bit, starting with the load. So for AFL Wii, what we would be doing is loading the game, which would entail creating the ball class and loading the ball 3D model up, and also its textures, creating the 44 footballer players, because there's 44, that's including subs in AFL, I'm pretty sure. Anyone you know? Anyway, and then we'd load each of their models and each of their unique like skin textures and face textures and that kind of stuff. And then what we do is we add these objects that we've created to the list, to a list, so that when we're updating and when we're rendering, we go through the list and we tell each object, all right, it's been 16 milliseconds since the last update, so you should do all of the things that you need to do within that 16 milliseconds to look correct. Yeah. All right, and then we'll step into the update. And now this is examples of the kind of stuff that we would do in the game update is for the footballer that's the player's footballer, we get the controller and set the footballer's running direction based on the thumbstick direction. What year are you guys in roughly? Like year 10 or 11? 12? Yeah. All right. So there's a bit of a range. But have you guys done much like 3D vector stuff? All right. Well, basically, when you're working with games, especially gameplay programming, in a 3D game, you're dealing a lot with 3D vectors, which describe the like directions and positions and stuff. So what we do here is we get the thumbstick and and say it's pointing like forward left. That means it's facing in a forward left vector. And then so we know to tell the footballer that you've got to be moving forward left based on the camera. Yeah, so that's that part. And then we do things like football position equals current position plus running direction times delta, which makes sure that they move in the direction that you're holding, but they only move as much as they should for that frame. And then also a similar thing for the ball. As it's flying through the air, it's got its own vector of where it should be moving, and that vector will be changing as it flies because gravity is pulling down on it. But every frame, it ticks along a little bit and goes, all right, this is my new vector that I'm going along. I've got to move along it by the amount that I should for 16 millis, and then continually just moving. Like, you can, often for games, we'll run it at that slow speed so that we can see what's happening every frame. Yeah, which is pretty helpful. Yeah, and then the render is pretty simple logically. You just take all of the objects that are in the list, all of those footballers, you get their current positions, and then you render the model at those positions. And yeah, so that's the game loop, basically. Yeah, so here's an example of it, which is in Shadowfield, the game that I made in my spare time last year. It's like a tactical strategy game, kind of like a little bit like XCOM or something. So in this first frame, the player's told the Dalla, the character at the top, to move right. So I would so I give Dalla a vector to move right, and then every frame she moves right a little bit more, and also that's her animation sheet in the top right hand corner. I tell her to play each one of those animations each frame, so that it'll look like she's walking. Then you can make a dance. Anyway, that's basically what I was going to say about the game loop. But I was just going to also say one other thing, which is that if you want to get into games, you can start making games right now. Like you can just go home, and then on the computer you've got at home, you can download. I've got a couple of links here. You can download, Game Maker or Multimedia Fusion 2, or like Flash Develop, and then develop with Flixel or Flashpunk, and you can start making your own games. A couple of things I was going to say about that is use Google as much as possible. Like, I know that when I was in school, the teachers would always like frown upon you for going to Google to look something up, but when you're working in games, that's what you do all the time. Like, I'm like on Google all the time, looking at how to do things and that kind of stuff. If you're going to try to make a game, start with the smallest possible thing that you can think of, and just try to make that. And then once you've made that, or even once you fail to make that, then try to make something even smaller, because it's like it takes a long time to figure out how to make games. But the best way to do it is just to get started. That's basically all I've got for my notes and stuff. That's a website up there which has some more links for good websites if you're interested in getting into games. Questions and stuff? Yeah.
Do you have any tips for iPhone development?
Basically, you can get started with iPhone development just by downloading the free, like signing up for a developer account, which you don't have to pay for if you're just going to be running it in the simulator. And you can just get started like that. You'll be programming, you have to learn Objective-C to be able to do it, unless you're going to use Unity or something like that. Objective-C is kind of similar to C++, but it has a bit of a different syntax. But yeah, I would just recommend download, go to developer.apple.com and download that SDK, and possibly also look into an iPhone engine like Unity or Coco's 2D as well, which is what I made Shadowfield on. Yeah.
How many gaming languages are you actually proficient in?
Let me think. C++, C, C#, ActionScript, Java, JavaScript. Yeah, like 7 or 8 of Objective-C, and that kind of stuff as well. Once you know a few programming languages, you can kind of pick up other ones pretty easily, because they've got differences, but it's kind of like they're kind of like real languages, and they're just accents from different areas, kind of. Yeah. Any other questions? Anything? I could just like talk about what life is like being a programmer, Wicked Witch. Just go in there every day and stuff.
Do you have any recommendations on how to like sort of get started to learn like C++ and
Well, I'd look into GLUT, GLUT, which is a simple OpenGL rendering library, and just search Google for like GLUT game example, basically, and just start looking up like simple game tutorials and that kind of stuff. Download those, have a look through the code, and then just start playing around with variables. Like there might be a tutorial that's a gravity one where there's a ball bouncing or whatever, and then try to track down the code that controls the elasticity of the ball, so that and just experiment and play around with stuff that you can find online. Yeah.
How long did it take you to learn your first script?
Well, I did a bit of stuff in high school, which but that wasn't really scripting. It was probably in uni that that I started properly learning Java, which took it took like 6 months to learn Java, and then it kind of took 6 months as well to learn C++ in uni. But the thing about programming is that you're kind of like always still learning more stuff. Like even now, 4 years into my job, I'm still learning new things about C++ and learning new ways to do things and stuff. So that's one thing about programming, games programming, is that you're always learning how to do new things. Yeah?
Would you say it's a really difficult job, or is it one of those easy jobs that you enjoy if you like know what you're doing?
Well, it's one of those difficult jobs that you can enjoy if you know what you're doing, if that makes sense. Like it's really rewarding to have an idea and then figure out what the script for that idea would be, and then get that into the game. And like I kind of feel maybe it's just because I'm a programmer, but programmers in game development have kind of the most power out of any of the roles, because you're the one that's actually implementing the features. You're actually doing stuff. Like often I've even had arguments with my boss about how a particular feature of the game should be, and so if I was just a designer and I wasn't a programmer, like I'd just be screwed if he disagreed with me, and then I just wouldn't be able to do anything about it. But because I'm a programmer, what I can do is just like spend a late night, put in the feature the way I think it should be, and then show him in the morning, and then be like, well, this is how it would be if it was my way. And then that can often convince him of like, oh yeah, that is better because you've actually got it in there. Yeah, so programming is pretty awesome, but it's pretty difficult to get started.
What's the average salary for a game programmer, or does it change from job to job?
Well, I think the entry point is roughly $30K a year, which is kind of standard entry point for programming in general. But at least in my experience, if you're doing a good job, you're looking at some raises. Yeah?
When coding for games, what kind of programs do you use?
Basically, we're using, for iPhone development, we use Xcode, which is the development API on Mac that you have to use. But for everything else, we use Visual Studio, Microsoft Visual Studio, which you can download a free version of that as well. It's called like Microsoft Visual Studio C++ Express, and you can download C# ones as well. Yeah. Yeah?
How did you get into your job, like for the AFL weekend? You just kind of, do they put out asking for programs and just kind of rock up and show something? Or?
Well, for like, do you mean how did I because I made that at Wicked Witch. Do you mean when how did I get into Wicked Witch, or how did Wicked Witch get the job?
How did you get into
Yeah. Well, basically, like I did a course here at Monash, multimedia systems, and then for that we had to do 4 weeks of work experience at an actual company. So I contacted all of the companies in Melbourne, the games companies, and Wicked Witch were the only one who like responded, and they said, yeah, you can come in for 4 weeks. And so I came in and just worked my butt off, and then like 3 weeks into it, they were like, you know, they wanted to hire me off of that. That's not to say that I was like, you know, a genius or anything like that. Like I was pretty crap when I just got out of uni, but I think just because I showed them that I was like willing to work hard and that kind of stuff, they took a chance.
Is it generally hard to get into?
It is pretty hard to get jobs, especially at the moment because of the global financial crisis and all of that stuff you've probably heard. But it's also pretty exciting, especially on the indie front, because there are a lot of independent developers who are able to like make small games for the iPhone and stuff and get their name out there and get some success. So that's why I'd kind of say, you know, you can even start your path as an indie developer now and try to make some tiny games and work your way up. And I think that would definitely help for if you're later on looking at jobs within the larger industry. If you've got some indie games that you can show them and say, hey, I made these. So like, because not a lot of people out there who are looking for jobs at the moment have something really cool to show off. Yeah. Any questions up the back? Anybody I missed? Or yeah.
Do you actually need certain grades to get into like game development?
Not really. It's more of a it's more of that kind of interview thing where when you do an internship at a place and they kind of try you out. Like I had decent grades. I think I had a credit average or something. So I didn't some of the guys I work with had like distinction or HD averages or something, but I just had a credit average. But because I showed them that, you know, I was willing to like work hard and kind of work and also to work in their style, which there are a lot of people out there who are really smart, but they don't work well in a team. So it's pretty hard for them to find jobs as well. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions or things? Requests? I can do a dance. Maybe not. Yeah. Well, I guess that can probably be it. I don't know what time. Do you know what?
2:39.
Yeah. Am I supposed to like keep these guys locked in here until a certain time? Or?
No, you don't. You don't have to keep them locked in.
Damn.
You have to.
What games are you currently working
I can't say what I'm working on at Wicked Witch, but I can say that it's pretty awesome. And like find Wicked Witch on Facebook and Twitter and like us and follow us and stuff, so you can keep updated on what we're making, because we're making a pretty cool game at the moment that, yeah, I reckon you'd all like. Yeah.
Me and my friend next week are actually doing work experience at Wicked Witch.
Ah, yeah, cool.
I was just wondering, what's it like there?
Yeah, well, basically, what we get work experience kids from high school to do mostly is game testing. So we'll sit you down with the games that we're making and get you to go through the levels and give feedback on the levels and and also look for bugs in games, basically. Yeah.
How does it work, like developing a game for the console? Like when you test it, try to emulate it on a computer, or?
Usually what we do is we have emulators and we also have the device. Like on my desk at work, I've got a DS dev kit, a Wii dev kit, a 360 dev kit. So you use the emulator, which you get from Microsoft or whoever for just quick tests, but then you use the dev kit, which is the actual 360 for more in-depth testing, which I usually like to do as much testing as possible on the thing so that you can, like for the Wii, for instance, you can actually feel how the controls work and stuff, whereas if it's emulated, you're just kind of simulating the controls on the PC. Yeah. Yeah? Yeah?
Does game programming rely a lot on creativity and stuff like that? How do you write it?
It kind of depends on how much you want, like, how much you want to go in that direction. Like a lot of the people who, some of the programmers who I've worked with have been very just technical and very much like, you tell me what to do and I'll put it in the game. Whereas I've kind of chosen to be more like a designer as well as a programmer. So I'll sit in on design discussions and put my input into the game, and for this game that I'm working on at the moment, I'm the lead programmer on it, and I'm kind of like, for certain aspects of the design, I'm kind of in charge of those. So there's a lot of creativity involved with that part of it. Yeah.
What sort of projects have you done in the past? Other games?
Yeah, I've done. There was AFL Wii, which was released this year. AFL and NRL and Rugby League Challenge for the PSP, which was released last year or something. I've done a few. The 361 was a platformer, side-scrolling platformer, but in 3D. That was a demo that we took to E3, but it's on hold at the moment. I've also worked on AFL Mascot Mana and NRL Mascot Mania for the DS, which are like kids games where like you play as the AFL team's mascots and like jump around and fight the other mascots and stuff. So that was a pretty fun project. Just quickly, I'll say that that's another thing with the games industry that is a bit of a bummer when you get into it, because you don't get to choose what you work on really. Like my friend Russell at work, when he joined up to Wicked Witch, he had to work on Pony Friends 2 for 2 years, and that was a pretty crappy project. But now he's working on some stuff that he's more happy with. So yeah, I'll just this one first. Yeah.
Roughly, how long does it take to program one game?
Depending on the game and the complexity and the engine that you're using and all that kind of stuff, it takes. AFL Wii took us a bit over 12 months, and that was a team of about 4 or 5 programmers. So, and those are like months of 8 to 12 hours a day programming. So it takes a long time. Definitely takes a long time. Yeah.
The better you are at programming, does that increase your chances of getting into better gaming companies and stuff, or is it more depending on your time spent in the industry?
Well, I think both of those help. If you're good at programming, you should be able to show off better projects, which would mean that you could move to like other companies easier if you wanted to. Moving to there aren't huge opportunities over here to work on like AAA games that a lot of you probably your favorite games like Modern Warfare or Gears or whatever, like all that's done overseas. So but to be able to go to those, if you work here for a while and have a pretty good history of games from working hard, then that's going to increase your chances a lot getting a job at one of those places. Yeah. But personally, I would say that it's like there are advantages and disadvantages at working at a AAA place. Have any of you heard about the Team Bondi stuff that's been happening recently, which is basically like this pretty big developer in Sydney were just like getting new people in and then working them like 18 hours a day, 7 days a week until they just got completely burnt out, and then just let those guys go, and then brought in more new people. So in certain AAA companies, there are other issues to be found, and also in a smaller company, you've got a lot more opportunity to have to have your own say on a project and to have your own input and stuff. Like, I'm 4 years into the industry and I'm a lead programmer on this project, and I doubt that could have happened if I was at Blizzard or whatever. Like 4 years in, I'd still be a junior, and then maybe 20 years in, I'd be able to be a lead. So, yeah. Is there anything else anybody wanted to know, or any other stuff? Yeah. I'll let you guys go, but I'll just say, try to make some games, and I look forward to seeing what you play. Yeah, feel free to get in contact with me or anything for more questions and that kind of stuff. Woo!